Hi everybody, I'm going to do a little video today if the camera will cooperate. I'm going to talk about my tractor, the updates I've been doing to it in the past couple of months. It's January now, and once the mowing season was over, I decided to do some parts needed replaced, and I got to work on that again because, like I said, the mowing was done, the mower was put away, and I had the time and didn't need the tractor that bad. But this is what I got on there now is my grater blade. It's not in the greatest of shape. I've welded a lot on this and patched it up. The guy who had the tractor before me threw this in on the deal just to entice me to buy the tractor. And it was if I had to rate it in what shape it was was poor, to say the least. It had been cracked here and there and bent, and straightened things out the best I could, welded back together the best I could, and salvaged it, made it decent. It's still a long ways from great, but you don't need perfect, just to push snow with. But on the back, the top of this had been cracked really bad. Hit something with it, I suppose, and cracked that. I was able to pull that back together and weld it. It's still not terribly great, and I don't trust it to be super strong, so when I do plow snow, I'm kind of gentle with it. The hole over here on the top where you adjust the angle of your blade was almost twice the size it should be. It just been wallered from the working of the pin back and forth that holds it in there. So I found a couple shims I had, and I tacked those on there to fill in basically the size of the hole, and plus the height of it. I can put a longer pin down through there, and it holds it stable, and makes it a lot more solid as far as not wanting to flop around like it used to and everything else. The 3-point, that corner right there especially had been bent, was not straight. Worked on that and got that straighter than it was, and like I said, the thing's this old and I don't need anything too fancy to move snow with. It's better than my garden tractor with a blade on it by a long shot. A lot happier with this setup. And I must say, today is a warmer day out here. It's in the 40s right now, almost. We've had a couple of days in the 50s for January, and it melted all the snow off. I had a considerable amount of snow there for a while. And it warms up and the snow's gone, then it turns around and snows again. So hopefully nothing too major. I'll show you looking down at that what it looks like. But as far as the grater blade, like I said, I'm pleased with it. It's basically, I got it for nothing. The wind doesn't mess up the sound, but got it for nothing. The guy threw it in just to get me to buy the tractor, and I went ahead and said, why not? I think I could fix it. If not, it'll be worth something for scrap. But put it back together, and like I say, I think it'll hold together for me. Done a good job so far, and it's been 3 or 4 years. I haven't broke it yet, so cross your fingers. Come around here and look at the motor. You're going to notice the cylinder head looks a little different. Last summer I did a compression check, and I was at 105 in all my cylinders, which isn't too terrible bad. I could live with that. The trouble I had with the motor was at high RPM, like when you're mowing or something, it seemed to have a mist to it, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I thought maybe I had an exhaust valve that was not seating right or something, and I was at an auto parts store in town, and they had one of these scopes that you can look in the cylinders with for like half price. It was like 50% off, and it looked like a nice little setup, so I went ahead and bought it. and came home and took my plugs out and looked at all my cylinders, and they are very nice for if you want to look at your valves with the little mirror on the end of the camera, the scope. You can feed it in there and really get a pretty good look at your cylinder walls and valves and everything else. And two of my valves look like they didn't seat in as well as the other two exhaust valves. And I thought, well, even though the compression's good, maybe it's time to do something about that. So after the mowing season was done, about Thanksgiving, I put the mower, cleaned it all up on top and scraped the bottom and put it away for the year. I backed this over on the other side of the barn and started taking it apart. And you know, my toolbox is right there by the tractor, and I didn't really kill myself doing it, but it only took about an hour and a half, and I had to head off this thing. And didn't look as bad as I thought, but they still looked like they could use some attention. So it went to the machine shop, and they worked it over good. Put new put new valves in it, but they ground the valves and put new valve guides and everything in it. Decked the bottom of the head. It said it was just a tiny bit warped. Came back and put it all back together, and now I have 125 in each cylinder going across, and that's a lot better. Like I said, I think 130, 135 is pretty well perfect for a brand, new tractor, but don't know on that. But I'm fairly happy with how the cylinder head turned out and everything. One thing I will say about your cylinder heads, and in the shop manual it says to torque it down to the specs they give you, the rocker arm and the valves, also, and then start the tractor up and let it warm up for 5-10 minutes, and then go back and re-torque everything. And I'm glad I did, because each bolt on the cylinder head at least took about 90 more degrees to get it to torque. So that's something you ought to consider if you do this. It's not like a car motor where they want you to just do it once and you're done. This, you warm it up and then you go back and redo it again. Also will mention too that I had a little smoke coming out of the top of my valve cover, out of the breather, and I thought maybe my exhaust valves weren't seating right because getting the smoke out and the seals maybe were gone. I guess on ag tractors especially, there are no seals on the exhaust valves. They are on the intake for the suction for the draw, but not on the exhaust. So if you get a little smoke coming out, it's not that big of a deal. Didn't know it at the time, but now I know it. But good compression now. The rings all look good. The pistons look good. The only thing left really to do is from my seal kit is next time I change my oil, I'm going to take the pan off and put the gasket on that. It leaks a little bit in the front, but that's nothing major. I can wait. Also have a new distributor on it, if I can get in there to look at it. One of the problems I had, like I said, was when I would rev it up, it seemed to miss at high RPM. And when I bought the scope, I bought me a $29 timing light. This is the only vehicle or engine that I have that actually has a distributor on it. Everything else has a coil pack, and really don't need a timing light for anything else I've got. But I bought it for this, just out of curiosity, just to find out if the distributor is doing what it should be doing. And it came to find out my mechanical advance on the distributor I had was shot. The idle is supposed to be at 4 degrees advanced, and when wide open it's supposed to be at 24 degrees advanced. And I could set this at 4 degrees and then open the throttle up on it, and it might go to 16 degrees one time and 30 degrees the next time. It just wasn't working the way it should. The spring was probably just bad on it. I knew who sold distributors for these things. Nobody will sell you a mechanical advance only. They'll sell you a distributor, but not the mechanical advance. They'll sell you the springs. They won't even tell you who does that kind of work. And I understand why, but the deal was, I couldn't fix my mechanical advance. The only thing I could come close to was an 8-inch side mount distributor, the mechanical advance for it. But that distributor and this distributor is a different number. They look the same pretty well, but you can see differences in it. And I didn't want to pay $80 for something I really adapted this in back. So I got a new distributor. Excuse me. And looked good. Everything, brand new. The threads and stuff on the casing aren't stripped like some of the my old one was. Took it all apart, had to work the mechanical advance on it and lube it up because it was unlubed and pretty stiff. But worked it a while and got it kind of all broke loose, as I would call it. Put it in there. It does a good job. Have no portals with it. The shop manual, they want you to advance it 24, as far as you can advance, I guess, put it, and then turn your casing to where the points are just starting to open at 24 degrees on your flywheel there. And you need about 3 or 4 hands to do all that, and I couldn't do it. So since I had the timing light, I just put it at 4 on idle, set it, and started it up, ran it. It still had a little bit of a miss at high idle. Not as bad as it was, but it still had that. So I was happier, but not totally happy. But called one of my friends. He works on tractors for a living. And he said he'd stop by and take a look at it for me. He happened to be in the neighborhood coming back from town. And he came, and I was still finishing up with the distributor, putting it in. And he was running it up and down the idle and throttle, I mean. And he says, "Hey, I think I found your problem." And I just got all my tools picked up and come around the other side. And he said, "You got a vacuum leak. So what part of your problem is?" And I said, "Where?" And he got down here, and this will focus. But came over here, and right here where this tag is, there's a rivet right on the underside that holds that tag on there, and that goes all the way into the throttle through the carburetor. And the rivet was missing, the tag was missing on my old carburetor, on the new carburetor I'd put on. It fell out or wiggled out, I don't know, but it's not one of those things, unless you got way down there and really looked, you'd notice even. So I put my thumb over it, and she smoothed right out. So I had my rebuilt here, my old one I'd rebuilt, and so I took that new one off and put the old one back on, and we fiddled with the mixture just a bit on idle and everything else, and boy, she runs great now with the new heads redone and the timing right and mechanical advance working, and that's no vacuum leak out of the carburetor. I mean, she really hums now. So I'm kind of, I won't say anxious to be mowing again, but when I get the mower on there and take off, I'm hoping that everything will be ship shape. The one thing I need to do yet is replace my alternator. I have a new one and a new bracket to mount it with. Nowadays, the 3-wire alternators are kind of going by the wayside, and they have internal voltage regulators in them. So they'll be getting on there sometime shortly. I haven't gotten around to it yet. When I got this, I checked the alternator, and it was putting out about 12.8. and now it's only putting out about 12.1, 12.2, and I can't use my headlights per se, like to, you know, drive at night. Or I was plowing snow the other day, I had them on a little bit and ran the battery down. It just can't charge the battery up with the accessories on like that. If you run it for an hour or so, it will charge the battery back up for what you use to start it. But it's not doing its job very well. It could be the regulator is just bad, or it could be the brushes in the alternator. But actually, I think this came off a car. It's not even made for the tractor, and maybe they're you can exchange, or interchangeable, I guess is the word I'm trying to think of. I don't know. It's a Delco alternator is all I can tell you, and it's pretty old. But I got a new one. They're not that salty. It's one wire. You just run it up to the positive side of the battery, and it should be putting out about 14 amps, so 14 volts I mean, so ought to be happy with that. But that carburetor really kind of blew my mind. But my friend rebuilds alternators. Maybe I'll have him work on this when he has the time. Could be, I don't know. I also put a new radiator in there. Took the tin off, and I knew the radiator something had been into the radiator, my old radiator, somewhere along the line, because it was chewed up in one corner on the inside near the top. And got to looking at it, and when I drained it, I mean, it had a ton of that stop leak in it. The motor did too. And it never overheated on me, and it never leaked. But boy, I looked at it, and it had rust around the bottom corners real bad. And I called a guy I knew who fixed radiators, and he says it's going to be about 150 to 200 to do a decent job on it. Well, you can get a new one for about 250. So I just got a new one, put it in there, and pretty happy with it. I think this ought to last me for my lifetime with this tractor anyhow. And I'll let you look at this side of the cylinder head. Can't see too well with everything on there, but the one thing I will mention over again is warm this engine up and then retorque them, because like I said, it took about 90 degrees on each cylinder head at least, and took me about an hour and a half to get her all apart and get the head off. It probably took me 3 hours to put it all back together, just because you gotta set gaps on the valves, and you gotta kind of clean things up. Sometimes you think you're all ready to go and you're just not. I just set the tank on top of the valve cover and connected the line to run it to warm it up. And then I just disconnected the line and lifted the tank back off. I also blew out all the fuel lines and cleaned the tank out real good while I had it out. Glad I did that, because it had a ton of junk in there. That the screen was about half plugged inside the tank. But now she's doing better. So like I said, she's pretty happy now. She's going, and this summer when I change the oil at the start of the year, I'll probably change that pan gasket. But that's it for about now. I think I'm gonna shut this off and get my hydraulic remote played out and do a quick video about that. But catch you guys later.